Chaldean Oracles of Zoroaster, to which is added the Hypostasis of the Archons, circa 3rd century AD, new edition 2015 CE, edited by Tarl Warwick. Forward by Warwick. The Chaldean Oracles comprise one of the most important collections of short statements, for the work is overall quite short, ever penned by mankind. Largely unknown by those outside of theology and the occult, early Gnostic writings such as this nonetheless framed the philosophical discourse which would later give rise to Christianity itself. Even as Gnosticism was oppressed and later forced underground, having fallen out of favor with the Romans, which had converted wholesale to their own quasi-Christian cult. Written sometime in the 2nd century, or thereabouts, the Chaldean Oracles may have been the work of a certain Julian the Theurgist, who in this tradition claims the works were revealed by none other than Zoroaster himself. It matters little where the actual origin lies, for the importance of the work revolves more around its effect upon later philosophy, including the work of early Christians. Within this text is Hecate, referred to in various ways. This Phosphoros is indeed the feminine version of the same dispenser of wisdom alluded to in almost every religion in some form or another. The concept of hierarchy is, as is usually the case in any Gnostic text, important and central, everything being purposefully arranged into orderly systems, one level subjected to another, or emanating from another, in a system in which above all, or above almost all, sits a central, singular, unbroken power, which has the strange capability to be everything and nothing at the same time. This unbroken whole, as it were, encompassing all, later leads to the concept of the Christian deity as omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. Even though later writings attempt to make this being more anthropic, more tangible, and more concerned truly with human existence and with the ways of the physical world, something the Gnostic monad is unwilling, generally, to do, being indivisible and unmovable, From this central, total force, then, comes a great set of powers, and dichotomy springs forth, witnessing and experiencing itself, after which come forth the incorporeal, ethereal powers and figures of existence, as well as the more physical, normal and mundane beings, such as humans and animals. Within the Chaldean Oracles, the purpose given for man is to ignore what might be termed the more childish side of the occult and mystic, whose powers are said here to be merely, toys, and instead to ponder the great philosophical hierarchy of the text and of Gnostic teaching itself. The Chaldean Oracles of Zoroaster. Monad, duad, triad. Where the paternal monad is, the monad is enlarged, which generates duality. For the duad sits by him and glitters with intellectual sections, and to govern all things, and to order every thing not ordered. For in the whole world shines the triad, over which the monad rules. This order is the beginning of all existence. For the mind of the Father said, that all things be cut into 3, whose will assented, and then all things were divided. For the mind of the Eternal Father said into 3, governing all things by the mind. And there appeared in it these 3 virtues and wisdom, and great variety. In this way flows the shape of the triad, being pre-existent, not the first, but where they are measured. For thou must conceive that all things serve these three principles. The first course is sacred, but in the middle, another, the third, ethereal, which cherishes the earth in fire. And fountain of fountains, and of all fountains, the matrix containing all things. Thence abundantly springs forth the generation of varied matter. Thence extracted a star, the flower of glowing fire, flashing into the cavities of the worlds. For all things from thence begin to extend downwards their admirable beams. Father Mind. The Father has snatched away himself, neither has he shut up his own fire in his intellectual power. For the Father perfected all things, and delivered them over to the second mind, which the whole race of men calls the first light, begotten of the Father. For he alone has cut the flower of the mind from the Father's vigor. For the paternal self-begotten mind, understanding such work, sewed in all the fiery bond of love, that all things might continue loving forever. Neither those things which are intellectually context in the light of the Father in all things, that being the elements of the world, they might persist in love. For it is the bound of the paternal depth and the fountain of the intellectuals. Neither went he forth, but dwelt in the paternal depth, and in the aditum, according to divinely nourished silence. For the fire once above degrades not his power into matter by actions, but by the mind. For the paternal mind has sowed symbols through the world, which understand intelligible things, and beautifies everything in existence. Wholly divided and yet unable to be divided. By mind he contains the intelligible, but introduces sense into the worlds. By mind he contains the intelligible, but introduces soul into the worlds. Mind the intelligible intellectuals. And of the one mind, the intelligible mind, for the mind is not without the intelligible. It exists not without it. These are the intellectuals and the intelligible, which being understood, understand. For the intelligible is the ailment of the intelligent. Learn the intelligible, since it exists beyond the mind, and of the mind which moves the ethereal heaven. For the framer of the fiery world is the mind of the mind, you who know certainly the extraordinary paternal depth. The intelligible is predominant over all section. There is something intelligible, which it behooves thee to understand with the flower of the mind. For if you seek to understand this former notion, you will understand this also. Yet in this understanding you will not fully comprehend it, for it is a power of completed strength, glittering with intellectual beams. But it behooves not to consider this intelligible with obsession of mind, but with ample flame of the ample mind, which measures all things except this intelligible. But it behooves to understand this. For if you focus your mind on this, you will understand this also, not fixedly, but having a pure turning eye. Extend the empty mind of your soul towards the intelligible, that you may learn the intelligible, for it exists beyond the mind. But every mind understands this God, for the mind is not without the intelligible, neither is the intelligible without the mind. To the intellectual presters of the intellectual fire, all things by yielding are subservient to the persuasive counsel of the Father. And to understand, and always to remain in a restless whirling, fountains and principles, to turn and always remain in a restless whirling. But insinuating into worlds the venerable name in a sleepless whirling, by reason of the terrible menace of the Father. Under two minds, the life-generating fountain of souls is contained, and the Maker, who self-operating framed the world, who sprang out of the first mind, clothing fire with fire, binding them together to mingle. The Great One preserves the flower of his own fire. He glitters with intellectual sections, and filled all things with love. Like swarms they are carried, being broken about the bodies of the world. That things not yet created may be fashioned. What the mind speaks, it speaks by understanding. Power is with them. Mind is of her. Jingas, ideas, principles. These being may ascend into the lucid worlds, springing into them, and in which there may be three penultimate. Beneath them lies the chief of immaterialness, principles which have understood the intelligible works of the Father. Disclosed them in sensible works as in bodies, being the intermediate level betwixt the Father and matter, and producing manifest images of intangible things, and inscribing intangible things in the manifest frame of the world. The mind of the Father made a jarring noise, understanding by vigorous counsel singular ideas, and flying out of one fountain they spring forth. For from the Father was the counsel and end, by which they are connected to the Father, by alternate life in several different ways. But they were divided, being by intellectual fire distributed into other intellectuals. For the king did set before the multiform world an intellectual, incorruptible pattern. This print through the world he promoting, of whose form according to which the world appeared beautified with all kinds of ideas, of which there is one fountain, out of which come rushing forth others undistributed, being broken about the bodies of the world, which through the vast recesses like swarms are carried round about every way. Intellectual notions from the paternal fountain cropping the flower of fire, in the point of sleepless time of this original and prime idea. The first self-budding fountain of the Father budded. Intelligent Jingas do in their own power also understand from the Father, by unspeakable counsels being moved so as to understand. Hecate Sinoches Teletarchs. For out of him spring all implacable thunders, and the prester receiving cavities of the entirely lucid strength of father-begotten Hecate. And he who creates and crops the flower of fire, and the strong spirit of the poles fiery above, he gave to his presters that they should guard the tops, mingling the power of his own strength in the Sinoches. Oh, how the world has intellectual guides, inflexible. Because she is the operator, because she is the dispenser of life-giving fire. Because also it fills the life-producing bosom of Hecate, and instills in the Sinoches the indwelt strength of potent fire. But they are guardians of the works of the Father, for he disguises himself, possessing to be clothed with the print of images. The Teletarchs are comprehended by the Sinoches, to these intellectual presters of intellectual fire. All things are subservient, but as many as serve the material Sinoches, having put on the completely armed vigor of resounding light, with triple strength fortifying the soul and the mind, to put into the mind the symbol of variety, and not to walk in broken paths on the ethereal channels, but rather fixedly. These concepts frame those which are indivisible, those which are sensible, and those which are corporeal, and things destined to matter. Soul, nature. For the soul, being a bright fire, by the power of the Father remains immortal, and is mistress of life, and possesses many complexions of the cavities of the world. For it is in imitation of the mind, but that which is born hath something of the body. The channels being intermixed, she performs the works of incorruptible fire. Next, the paternal conceptions indwelt by the soul. Warm, heating all things. For he did put the mind in the soul in the dull body. Of us the Father of gods and men imposed abundantly animating light, fire, ether, worlds. For natural works coexist with the intellectual light of the Father. For the soul which adorned the great heaven, and adorning with the Father. But her horns are fixed above, but about the shoulders of the goddess, immense nature is exalted. Again, indefatigable nature commands the worlds and works, that heaven, drawing an eternal course, may run, and the swift sun might come about the center as he pleases. Look not into the fatal name of this nature. The world. The Maker who operating by himself framed the world, and there was another bulk of fire, by itself operating all things, that the body of the world might be perfected, that the world might be tangible, and not seem fractured. The whole world of fire, water, and earth, and all nourishing ether, the inexpressible watchwords of the world. One life by another from the distributed channels, passing from above to the opposite part, through the center of the earth, and another fifth, middle, fiery channel, where it descends to the material channels. Life-bringing fire stirring himself up with the goad of resounding light. Another enlarged, which guides the ethereal world. The center from which all rays which way soever are equal, for the paternal mind sowed symbols through the world. For the center of every one is carried betwixt the fathers, for it is in imitation of the mind, but that which is born hath something of the body. Heaven. For the Father congregated 7 firmaments of the world, circumscribing heaven in spherical form. He fixed a great company of unmoving stars, and he constituted a septenary of living animals, placing earth in the middle, and the water in the middle of the earth. In the air above these he fixed a great company of unmoving stars, to be carried not by laborious and troublesome tension, but a settlement which has no error. He fixed a great company of immobile stars, forcing fire to fire, to be carried by a settlement which has no error. He constituted them sixfold, casting into the midst of them the fire of the sun, suspending their disorder in well-ordered lowness. For the goddess brings forth the great sun, and the bright moon. O ether, sun, spirit, guides of the moon and of the air, and of the solar circles, and of the monthly movements, and of the aerial recesses. The melody of the ether, and of the passages of the sun, and moon, and of the air, and the wide air, and the lunar course, and the pole of the sun. Collecting it, and receiving the melody of the ether, and of the sun, and of the moon, and of all that are contained in the air. Fire, the derivation of fire, and the dispenser of fire. His hair pointed is seen by his native light. Hence comes Saturn. The sun assessor, beholding the pure pole, and the ethereal course, and the vast motion of the moon, and the aerial movements, and the great sun, and the bright moon. Time. The mundane God, eternal, infinite, young and old, of a spiral form, and another springing forth, who guides the ethereal heaven. Soul, body, man. It behooves you to hasten to the light, and to the beams of the Father, from whence was sent to you a soul clothed with much mind. These things the Father conceived, and so the mortal was animated. For the paternal mind sowed symbols in souls, replenishing the soul with profound love. For the Father of the gods and men placed the mind in the soul, and in the body he established you. For all divine things are incorporeal, but bodies are bound in them for your sakes, incorporeals not being able to contain the bodies, by reason of the corporeal nature in which you are concentrated. And they are in God, attracting strong flames, descending from the Father, from which descending, the soul crops of ethereal fruits, the soul-nourishing flower. And therefore conceiving the words of the Father, they avoid the audacious wing of fatal destiny. And though you see this soul manumitted, yet the Father sends another to make up the number. Certainly, these are superlatively blessed above all souls. They are sent forth from heaven to earth, and those rich souls which have inexpressible fates, as many of them as proceed from shining you, or from Jove himself, under the strong power of his might. Let the immortal depth of your soul be predominant, but all thy eyes extend upward. Stoop not down to the dark world, beneath which continually lies a faithless depth, and Hades dark all over, squalid, delighting in images, unintelligible, precipitous, craggy, a depth, always rolling, always espousing a shadowy, idle, breathless body. And the light-hating world, and the winding currents by which many things are swallowed up. Seek paradise. Seek the way of the soul, whence or by what order, having served the body, to the same place from which thou didst follow. Thou must rise up again, joining action to sacred speech. Stoop not down, for a precipice lies below the earth. Drawing through the ladder, which has 7 steps, beneath which is the throne of necessity, enlarge not your destiny. The soul of men will in a manner clasp God to herself. Having nothing mortal, she is wholly inebriated from God. For she boasts harmony, in which the mortal body exists. If you extend the fiery mind to the work of piety, you will then preserve the flexible body. There is a room for the image also in the circumlucid place. Every way to the unfashioned soul stretch the reins of fire. The fire-glowing cogitation has the first rank. For the mortal approaching the fire shall have the light of God. For to the slow mortal the gods are swift. The Furies are stranglers of men. The burgeons, even of ill matter, are profitable and good. Let hope nourish you in the fiery angelical region, but the paternal mind accepts not her will until she go out of oblivion and pronounce a word, inserting the remembrance of the pure paternal symbol. To these he gave the teachable character of life to be comprehended. Those that were asleep he made fruitful by his own strength. Defile not the spirit, nor deepen the visible aspect of life. Leave not the dross of matter on a precipice. Bring her not forth, lest going forth she have something. The souls of those who quit the body violently are most pure. The destroyers of the soul, which give her breathing, are easily loosed. In the side of sinister Hecate, there is a fountain of virtue, which remains entire within, not omitting her virginity. O man, the machine of boldest nature, subject not your mind to the vast measures of the earth, for the plant of truth is not upon earth, nor measure the measures of the sun, gathering together cannons. He is moved by the eternal will of the Father, not for your sake. Let alone the swift course of the moon. She runs ever by the impulse of necessity. The progression of the stars was not brought forth for your sake. The ethereal wide flight of birds is not voracious, and the dissections of entrails and victims, all these are toys, the supports of gainful cheats. Stay away from them, if you intend to open the sacred paradise of piety, where virtue, wisdom, and equity are assembled. For your vessel the beasts of the earth shall inhabit. These the earth bewails, even to their children. Demons, rights. Nature convinces us that there are pure demons. The burgeons, even of ill matter, are profitable and good. But these things I revolve in the recluse temples of my mind, extending the like fire gleaming into the spacious air. Or fire incorporeal, a voice issuing forth, or fire abundant, whizzing and winding about the earth, but also to see a horse more glittering than light. Or a boy on your shoulders riding on a horse, fiery or adorned with gold, or naked, or shooting and standing on your shoulders. If you speak often to me, you will see absolutely that which is spoken. For then neither appears the celestial concave bulk, nor do the stars shine. The light of the moon is covered, the earth stands not still, but all things appear as thunder. Invoke not the self-conspicuous image of nature, for you must not behold these before your body is initiated. When soothing souls, they always seduce them from these mysteries. Certainly out of the cavities of the earth spring terrestrial dogs, which show no true sign to mortal man. Labor about the hecatic blistering, never change barbarous names. For there are names in every nation given from God, which have an unspeakable power in rights. When you see a sacred fire without form, shining with great flashing through the depths of the world, hear the voice of fire.